going back to those uni days, I totally relate to that feeling of getting to uni and just being like, who am I?
Yeah.
Who are my friends? I feel so alone. Do people like me? Do people not? What do you think it was back then that alcohol was giving you in that moment?
I think confidence massively, because I was quite insecure. And I think like I went to uni and I felt really out of my depth. Like I I was state educated. I'd not travelled a lot. And then I remember like my first day I went in and they like went around and were like, how did everyone spend their summer? And everyone had these like amazing stories of like, oh, I was with my family in Barbados, or like I was travelling around the world. And I felt so out of my depth. And then I remember because I studied English, and they went around, they were like, tell us all the books that you read over summer as well. And everyone was going into these like, oh, I read Clockwork Orange. And I was like, oh, I just reread Harry Potter. Like it was, and I just all of a sudden remember being like, I'm so out of my depth here. Like, and I just use it for like being able to relate to people, because our experiences were like so different when I was talking to people. So I used it for that. And also I was always quite not confident about like the way I looked or the way people saw me. And I remember like getting ready for nights out, and I'd be like, oh, I hate my outfit, I hate the way I look. And I'd be like, oh, it's fine, I'll just drink and then I'll be okay. I think I used it for like so many different things, but confidence was one. And then I think the other biggest one was my brain is 1,000,000 miles per hour. So all of those insecure thoughts that I was having were just on repeat all the time. And so I used it to like massively calm down my nervous system, stop me overthinking every little thing and every little social interaction, which was now being intensified. So those I would say were the two biggest things that I was like using it for, definitely.
And how do you think your friends thought about you? Because obviously when you go to uni, people meeting you for the first time, they don't know you from school, or they don't have a history with you. What do you think your friends' perception was? Or were they just doing the same stuff?
I think they were all doing the same stuff. Like our first couple of years, especially at uni, it was just carnage on all counts. So I think all our behaviour kind of looked quite similar. I think the next day I was different to everyone else, because they would wake up the next day and be like, oh, I'm really hungover, let's go to McDonald's. And I'd be like crying my eyes out, because I just like the next day for me was awful, because I couldn't remember things, and they all could remember the night. They'd be like saying things. So I think it wasn't like the actual drinking, but it was the way that I reacted the next day. I think they did start to think that's not that normal. So yeah.
Was anxiety a term back then? Or is that a more modern?
Was just maybe creeping in.
Right.
I think I probably used to say like hangover anxiety. I don't know if it had quite contracted to anxiety at that point, but
which is your new book, and you'll be digging into that. How does that feel, going back into that and having to like revisit that stuff?
It's weirdly different. I think like I feel very removed from it now. So you know, like you said, is there anything you don't want to talk about? I'm like, no, because it doesn't necessarily even feel like a life that was mine. It's quite weird. Like I maybe have possibly disassociated too much from it, but I can really look at that like part of my life objectively, because it is so different to now. So when I'm like writing about it and revisiting it, I'm able, also I've had a lot of therapy, so I'm able to do it without the emotion completely attached to it. But it has been hard. And like in the book as well, I interviewed my best friend who talked about like they once had an incident when they were very drunk and they they did self-harm. And so like there were new layers of the book, whereas like the first book I wrote was very much like my story, and I think that I was only a few years in, so it was quite fresh and cathartic, whereas this I've sort of spoken to a lot more different people about their stories, so that was different, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredibly brave to like put that out in the world and let other people sort of, well, it's giving people the chance as well, I guess, to see themselves in that story and to demystify it a little bit and sort of say, you know, I've been there. So you talk about that moment where something shifted and you were like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. So you say it was a moment where you kind of you're like, was it kind of just a build up? Do you think that it got to the point where you're like, this is enough now?
Yeah, I think it was a bit, because I always say ironically, it wasn't the worst hangover I'd ever had, and it wasn't like I hadn't done anything crazy. I'd come home with all my belongings and I'd come home to where I live. And I think weirdly, because I had some sort of clarity the next morning, I was like, oh my God, like I kind of saw it for what it was. Whereas sometimes when I'd been so low and so like, oh my God, I've embarrassed myself, I've ruined my life, I've done X, Y, Z, the easiest thing for me was just black it out and then like go and drink more. Whereas I think for this, I had this clarity of like, what the hell are you doing? Like, so it's weird, because it wasn't like my rock bottom. I think everyone talks about these like rock bottom moments, but I always say I had like 400 rock middle moments of like, this is the time, this is the time. And I think, I don't know what it was that day, some sort of like, I don't know, something out there was like, you need to stop now.
It's now.
Yeah.
Now's the time. So that is quite a leap to then go, right, that's it. I'm not doing it anymore. Can you talk to me a bit about what those early days were like of navigating, okay, well, I'm going to stop drinking. Was it a hard stop for you?
Yeah, so I just stopped completely, and I said to my friends, like, I'm not going to drink for a bit. And they all thought that was hilarious because they were like, of course you will. You'll drink again. And like, now the joke's on them. But like at the time, I just stopped. I just said, like, I need a hard stop. I need a break. And like, it's weird. I always say, because there was part of me that felt 100 times better instantly, just because it had taken away that like every weekend layer of shame, and like initially not feeling hungover all the time was lovely. But there was also this other element of it being really, really hard. And especially because I had used it for every single uncomfortable emotion. Anytime I felt stressed or overwhelmed or that my brain was busy and wizzy, like I used it. So all of a sudden I was like, oh God, I've got feelings and I don't know how to deal with them.
Okay,
like for the first time I was like having to learn how to deal with all that stuff. So I think I was about 6 months in, I started getting really bad panic attacks because I was just so overwhelmed at the time. And I hadn't learned that I needed like an escape or another switch off. So that was then basically when I went into therapy after those 6 months, because I was like, I don't think I can white knuckle this anymore. But so it was like equal parts. Oh my God, this is amazing. I feel fantastic. And oh my God, what do I do with all these feelings? So it was very like mixed bag at the beginning.
I'm really curious to know about that kind of movement into a place of, I'm using this because I don't know how to deal with my feelings. And some people who just have like a little drink at the weekend just to relax, and it's just, they're just unwinding. Is there like a point where it flips from one to the other, or is it just a really blurry line? And can you just tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, I personally think it's a very blurry line, because there's no like binary of like when you're using it for certain things of like, I don't know how you're using it necessarily. I think everyone's relationships with alcohol are so personal, but I do think there is still something in the fact that if you are even having like a couple of drinks to unwind from stress, maybe you're trying to, cope with something that maybe you should be dealing with differently. So it's really hard to like, I don't ever want to shame anyone's like one or two drinks, because I believe that some people can have like a very fine relationship with alcohol. But I think it's that question of like, are you using this to avoid discomfort or avoid this feeling? Is there something else that you could be doing that might be like less harmful? Because I think one of like the crux of really anxiety as well is that like alcohol is actually kind of inefficient, because like the thing that you're using it for usually is intensified by it, like chemically, if nothing else. So, like if you're using it for stress, in the background, it can be activating your stress system. And if you're using it to, dull anxiety, actually the next morning you might get a little spike of anxiety. So it's one of those things that it's quite hard, that I just believe it's kind of quite inefficient. But if that's the thing you use and you're really happy with your relationship with alcohol, like I'm not here to tell you, oh, no one should be drinking, because
And I really relate to that feeling of, I never learned how to process my emotions or deal with emotions. And do you think like in our culture, in our society, that there is a bit of a lack of that? Like even growing up in the UK, it just wasn't a thing.
100%.
And I definitely relate as well to having to learn that, literally learn it in my 20s. What do you think? Like, how are we doing enough for people to sort of teach that? And what was that? I guess I want to know a little bit about how easy is it to learn at 26?
I think this is like fundamentally one of the places where we're going wrong, especially around like alcohol education and stuff. Everyone is like, oh, alcohol education, be like, these are the risks, this is what happens. But it's all very well knowing that information, but if you don't know how to cope with your emotions, then you're inevitably probably going to turn to something like alcohol, because, it's legal, it's normalized, it's all those things. So I think that education, at schools and things like that should actually start with like, okay, how do you cope with the things that a lot of people turn to alcohol for? How do you build confidence in kids so that they don't need to turn to it? Like all those things. I think that's one of the biggest things that we could be doing. It's more of that like psychoeducation piece rather than just being like, alcohol is bad for you. It's like, okay, well, I know that, but I can't cope without it. So what do I do? So I think that's where we fall short quite a lot on the like education side of it, to be honest.